Welcome into CyHawk Talk. We have a very special episode of the show today. We're talking with Christian McCollum of Minuteman Command, the best place to find UMass football content. Some fast facts on the Minutemen before we get started. The program first started playing football in 1879. They have one national championship from the FCS days, 1998. They have 21 conference titles, not been to a bowl game. Notable NFL alumni: Victor Cruz, the wide receiver for the New York Giants, and they have 5 players currently on NFL rosters. According to Wikipedia, that's probably wrong, but that's what I got on Wikipedia this morning. Christian, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having us, Ethan.
Um, just go ahead and give us a quick rundown. Give us the context of where this program's at in the first year of Coach Harasymiak.
Yeah, so Coach Harasymiak came in. He was, he was at previously DC at Rutgers and at Minnesota for 7 years. So he's, familiar in the Big Ten. Obviously, prior to that, he was a head coach at Maine. FCS program, had some success there, which kind of launched him to get his, to the Power Four level with PJ Fleck and Greg Schiano. UMass had Don Brown. It was just, he had multiple stints at UMass, second stint as a head coach, really a beloved figure there. They didn't have a ton of success under Coach Brown, but, the fan base was still, they believed in Coach Brown. It was kind of a split when they decided to move on from Coach Brown last year. A lot of fans felt like he deserved more than that. But either way, they made the decision to go in a different direction. Coach Harasymiak came in, kind of a young up-and-coming coach. Really, really drove change, right? So, I mean, they flipped their roster over, at least 50% of their roster, and they're too deep. Our new players from the transfer portal brought in a completely new staff, just one holdover from the previous staff, and really just kind of trying to preach that message of change, right? Not the same old UMass. We want to have some change. We're going to change things, how things are done. They've done a lot of new things, right? Like transfer portal being one of them. They're entering the MAC. This is, their first year fully in the MAC coming up here this season. Obviously, landscape of college football has changed with NIL and rev sharing and stuff like that. So they were positioning themselves to kind of, be at the top of the MAC, near the top of the MAC when it comes to those resources. So things were set up, there was a lot of, kind of doubt and, on the fans' part of holding back and not wanting, Lucy to pull the football again away from her again. And, unfortunately, the start has not been what they had hoped for, right? So first game was Temple, kind of a program in a similar situation as UMass. New coach, not a lot of wins before, new roster. And so it seemed like that opener would be a game where, it could go either way. And Temple won 42-10. UMass really did shoot itself in the foot a bit. But even if it hadn't, I don't think UMass was going to win that game, even with the miscues they had. So that wasn't a great start. Then you host FCS Bryant. This is a game that every UMass fan expected and should have expected to be an easy W. Not only was it not an easy W, it ended up being a loss. A lot of people have termed it the most disappointing loss in UMass football history. The start has not been great.
I guess let's look at that Bryant loss and what would be something that a Hawkeye fan doesn't know about what happened in that game, just looking at the box score or just looking at, the ESPN app and saying, oh, they lost to an FCS opponent. We didn't do that in week 1, so maybe we're going to be all right this weekend.
Yeah, see, so like it was an upset in terms of like Vegas odds and an FCS program coming in and beating an FBS program, but like watching the game, like if those two teams play tomorrow, it's probably a pick, right? It's like it wasn't like Bryant had these miraculous luck and they were fortunate to win the game. UMass absolutely had chances to put the game away, but Bryant had some chances that it missed as well. So it wasn't some fortunate error. I mean, it wasn't luck. Right. So it wasn't like a March Madness, 15 beats a 2 and it would never happen again. It was not pretty for UMass. And bottom line is, the biggest area for concern right now for UMass is their pass defense. They are not getting much pressure on the quarterback. And the guys in the back end have not proven up to the task in terms of coverage. So Bryant, essentially became one-dimensional from about the second quarter on. And that was a wise decision. They just threw the ball over the place. Temple did the same thing. Temple starting quarterback threw 6 touchdown passes against UMass. So there's been very little resistance from that pass defense. Like I said, there hasn't been any type of pass rush, and the guys in the back end have really, really struggled in coverage. And that first game against Temple, there were some guys out, some new guys in the secondary had to come in, and there were some miscommunications, right? But I said at the time that what concerned me most was the times when there weren't miscommunications and there were guys just looked to be physically incapable of, staying with guys. Now, Coach Harasymiak had his press conference earlier in the week, and he talked about alignment issues. And, you had guys playing inside leverage on a cut split, which is essentially when a receiver's lined up closer to the tackle or the tight end than usual. And that kind of is a hint that the wide receivers will be going out. So you got, cornerbacks twice lined up as inside leverage in that situation, which is just a error, right? A mental error, but they give up explosive plays, one of them being a 72-yard touchdown pass. So, it hasn't been good at all, the pass defense.
Well, I guess it's the stoppable force versus the movable object this weekend, potentially, as Iowa threw for less than 150 yards over its first 2 games. And that's the big concern here in Iowa City is how do we get this passing game going? Looking at UMass, were you expecting the pass defense to be the issue going into the season, or has that kind of been a surprise? And what were some of the preseason expectations for this squad in that first year of a new head coach?
Yeah, so the pass defense, it's always hard in camp, spring practice in camp, to know what you have in terms of the upfront, right? Is the offensive line great? Is the defensive line terrible? Vice versa, or probably somewhere in the middle. So in terms of pass rush, they did lose probably their number 1 transfer portal target before the season, Josh Nobles, a defensive end from Jackson State, just far and away, considered the best guy they landed. He ruptured his Achilles in preseason, so he was out. So that is, one guy they were hoping on to get some pass rush. But to be honest, the secondary coming into the season was a strength. Now they've been decimated, right? Their starting cornerback, Bo Barnes, has been out all season. He's expected to be out against Iowa. They lost safeties around Daniel in the opener against Temple. He didn't play against Bryant. They lost, another cornerback, kind of star guy, Malcolm Green, former, guy who saw plenty of time at Virginia Tech and Clemson in the secondary. They lost him for the last game. So there have been injuries, but, when you look at position groups for the season, the secondary is supposed to be a strength. And, yeah, you lose some top guys, but that's, when you have a strength in a position, you expect to have some depth there. They just don't have it, right? So that pass defense was a surprise to me, especially coming into the season. Expectations varied. Like I said, a lot of UMass fans feel like they've been here before. They feel like they've been sold this idea of change before, and it hasn't worked. So a lot of the more pessimistic fans were kind of on the, show me. I don't think they're going to win 3 games. I don't, and you'll have to show me. And to be honest, those fans right now are the ones that have the right to say, like, see, I told you so, you got our hopes up. Other people have, probably gone all the way to saying, if they could beat Temple, which obviously they didn't, everyone expected Bryant to be a W. They play Iowa, they play Missouri next. Nobody expected those to be wins. But you figured if you go 2-2 out of conference, and then maybe you can go 3-3, possibly 4-2 in the MAC, and you get to 6-6 in a bowl game. As you said, UMass never been to a bowl. So that was kind of like the high watermark, right? 6 wins, get to a bowl. That would be amazing. And right now, just to be honest, I mean, that's out of the question, quite frankly. And at this point, it's, I think everyone, like I said, nobody expected wins in Iowa and Missouri coming into the season. So they're certainly not expecting them now. So it's kind of get through these 2 games healthy. And then see if you can kind of salvage a season in conference play. And I don't even know what that looks like, to be honest, salvaging a season at this point.
I listened to Coach's press conference on Monday, and someone asked him, is the goal to just get out of this game healthy? And he said, no, we want to win. Does that resonate with the fan base? Because I can see that being like, oh, that's the coolest thing a coach had said. You absolutely need to say that. But I can also see him saying, come on, dude, be realistic. But if there's a 50-50 split, maybe it's 50-50 one way or the other. What's the response been to that comment in particular, or comments like that?
Well, I think it's basically that's what everyone would expect him to say. Had he said anything different, it would have been, a nightmare. I think that's the case for any coach, to be honest. But UMass fans aren't encouraged by anything right now, and nor based on what they've seen so far, nor should they be. So I don't think that comment got anyone all fired up or anything. I think it's more just like that's what he has to say, right? That's what any coach has to say. You're never going to go into a game saying, "Yeah, we're going to lose." Unless you're Grambling State against Ohio State. I think the coach kind of hinted at that last week. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a good opportunity. Coming into the season, you kind of thought this might be a test to see how far away are they, from competing with a school like Iowa. Right now, for the fans, like I said, it is kind of one of those, like, just kind of cover your face, hope it's not 70-0, 49-0, and hope you don't suffer even more injuries than you already have.
And then I'm curious, what's been the history of going up against Big Ten teams, power conference teams? Has UMass, do they have a big upset in their history, or is it, kind of just we're always the team that gets the check and gets beat up?
In general, they're usually the team that gets the check and gets beat up. But a lot of it's been in the past well, in the future, in the current time too. They're undermanned, right? They're not going to be able to go toe to toe. But UMass was leading Georgia 7-0 last year, right? Like late in the season. They hung with them for a half, and that was one of those games where fans were encouraged. They ended up getting beat pretty good, but it's like, man, look at that. And they've hung with teams in the past under different coaches. Not really won too many of them. But that's kind of what at this point, the fans are really, really low. But going out there and just kind of fighting and keeping it close and kind of showing some glimpses here and there would be, pretty, impressive for the fans. Now, there's a quarterback issue right now. Their starter went out with an injury last game, and that Georgia game I mentioned, AJ Hairston, he was a freshman at the time. He came in and he played pretty well against Georgia. So a lot of fans are clamoring to see him get a shot this week.
Yeah, it's an or on the depth chart at backup quarterback. Do you have an idea? Are we going to see both quarterbacks potentially? Illinois State did that last year where they rotated quarterbacks basically every series in the season opener against Iowa. Is it going to be both quarterbacks, or do you expect them to just ride with one or the other?
If I had to guess, and I don't know this, but my guess is Grant Jordan, the kid who came in off the bench last week in replacement of Rose, will be the starter. Hairston did get a series against Bryant, and he looked pretty good in that series. I wouldn't be surprised to see something similar, where maybe Jordan gets the start, and maybe Hairston, kind of gets maybe more than a series. I think he deserves more than a series at this point. But at the same time, Grant Jordan's strength is kind of that dual threat. Let me run around. If there's a pass rush, I can extend the play. Where Hairston's more of that drop back passer. And I don't think he will be able to extend those plays as much. I've always said coming into the season that if you told me that UMass's offensive line was going to protect and their receivers were going to get open, that Hairston could be a really, really top-notch quarterback. Their receivers have proven the ability to get open. The offensive line hasn't really proven the ability to protect. Somewhat they've been okay. But going into this game against Iowa, it's tough to imagine that they will be able to hold up. So even the fans that think Harrison's the best quarterback, and they might be right about that. I don't know if this matchup in particular would lend itself to Harrison's strengths.
You mentioned the injury at quarterback. There's also some other injuries on the offensive side. What's the story there? I saw two wide receivers are going to be out this weekend and a couple offensive linemen.
Yeah, they're pretty banged up. They lost one offensive lineman, another big-time transfer they got in from Duke, who was at Northwestern before, Zach Franks, along with Nobles. He's out for the season. They lost their guard, Sullivan Weidman. He didn't play last week. He's not expected to play this week. Wide receiver T.Y. Harding, coming into the season, was expected to be one of the most explosive players on the entire roster. He was lost in the first half against Temple. He dressed for Bryant but didn't play. He's expected to be out. Then another big wide receiver, Jake McCollum, a guy that's come up with some pretty crucial catches so far this season. He's going to be out. Obviously, quarterback Brandon Rose. So this is a not very good football team that's not very healthy right now.
Well, I guess that'll be it for our preview of this game. But where can our listeners find more UMass content if they're looking to really get familiar with the Minutemen before Saturday's contest?
Yeah, MinutemanCommand.com. You can find all of our stuff there on our Substack page, and then at UMass Command on Twitter, and at Minuteman Command on Instagram.
All right, Christian, I really appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan.